I'd like to introduce Asif Afridi, who's an old friend of mine personally, of BSEC and also previous working, who previously used to work as the deputy at BRAP, but he's now got the amazing role of CEO at Barrow Cadbury Trust. He's a board member of Lankelly Chase, Baring Foundation and the Pilgrim Trust, so huge experience in terms of grant making and understanding the needs of the sector and giving out grants. So the bits we were saying earlier, I think hopefully will land well. You've got a master's in human rights and democratisation, and you are someone with amazing expertise and, for me, a great thought leader. So could I welcome you to the front? Thank you. The second person I want to introduce is Charles Rapson, who doesn't really need any introduction. You're lead for social economy growth, and you worked for 10 years at School for Social Entrepreneurs, working across the region, supporting social economy organisations. And he takes an honest approach to the subject based on decades of experience, successes, and the odd failure. I found that quote on his LinkedIn. So would you like to come to the front? The third person who's going to talk about the system is Karolina, who also really doesn't probably need very much introduction. She's East Birmingham Programme Manager for Birmingham City Council. She's an innovator and a disruptor, working to grow the social economy, and experienced at working with all levels of government in the UK and Europe. And it's great having Karolina, I think, in the sector working with us, because she brings so many ideas, but she doesn't just bring the ideas, she turns the ideas into reality. So I've written down here, harvests and interprets ideas and reimagines them in Birmingham. Welcome, Karolina. And finally, I'm absolutely delighted that Gayle Monk was able to come and speak with us today. She's legal director at Anthony Collins, and she's an expert on public sector contracting and procurement, subsidy control and environmental matters. And actually, I think it's the biggest thing, the most important thing that we need to be getting our heads around as a sector, and to have Gayle working with us and advising us is really powerful. But she also wrote a book that I've been trawling through everyone's LinkedIn in 2011 called Working with the Public Sector, Busting the Myths. So at some stage, you'll be lovely to have a coffee and find out what you put in there. So Gayle, welcome. And I'm going to hand over to Asif, who's the chair for this session.
Great. You've got one here, yeah. This one should be, yeah. Thanks so much, Sarah. And you've already introduced our amazing panel. So we've got until about 10 to 11. The broad aim, as Sarah was saying, of this session is to go a bit deeper into the operating environment, the operating system for the social economy. You know, what do we think's working? What do we think could be improved? What do we think could be replicated? Where's best practice? That kind of thing. And the setup for the session is we're going to invite each panel member to speak for about 5 minutes, and then we'll be able to open it up for questions, and I'll take a few questions at a time and we can field them. Does that sound all right? Great, okay. Maybe if we start with you, Gayle, if that's okay.
For sure.
And I think you're going to talk to us about procurement.
Yes, and that always seems like an odd place to start when you're talking about how to build the social economy. But I come at this from the point of view of a public sector lawyer working in procurement, as you've heard from Sarah. Procurement is a huge deal, I think, not just financially. You know, all the figures are out there, and it's hundreds of billions of pounds worth of public spend goes to public contracts. So economically, it's worth taking seriously. But I think more significantly than that, I think there are cultural synergies between the public sector and the social economy. And I think there are policy objectives that are sort of common to both as well. So actually, both sectors have got a lot to offer to each other. So it becomes important for those in the social economy to understand how procurement works, and it becomes important for those in the public sector to understand the value that the social economy has to offer, and to be open and receptive to working with those organisations to achieve some really fantastic outcomes. So just to talk law just for a minute, The previous public contracts regulations set out a system for procurement which had a focus on open competition and transparency and the equal treatment of bidders. We keep that. We keep some of that European law history in the new Procurement Act. But what's happened with this act is a layer of, well, two layers. One of added transparency through the issuing by the public sector of countless notices, but an awful lot more information going out from the public sector into the public domain for us all to learn from. But also some policy objectives in that procurement law that I think are important, not necessarily in terms of how they're actually put into practice, because I'll come to that, but just in terms of actually making that statement at the heart of procurement law, in what we call the have regard duties, that there are policy objectives that the public sector ought to have regard to when they undertake procurement. And one of the most important of those is to identify the barriers that are felt by small businesses, SMEs, in the procurement process and to seek to break them down. That's then added to in the National Procurement Policy Statement, which says that actually that's not just SMEs, that is the VCSE sector as well, that's about breaking down those barriers and getting more of that sector into public spend. And a focus on social value. And I think that's fantastic. I'm not sure it's done exactly right, but I think having that policy statement there as a starting point is a really, really impactful thing to have. I was at some training on Friday that was talking from a really eminent KC about actually how you challenge that, though, and saying, well, how on earth do you actually get that put into practice? And that is the hard bit. Because the reality is when you look at the barriers that are felt by small businesses and the social economy to going into procurement, they're hard to break down. And I'm not sure we're there yet. There are a lot of those barriers to still work on. And we've added to them with some technological issues around how you actually engage with the central digital platform, for example. But I'm saying all of that, and actually what I really want to say is that the conversation needs to start well before the procurement process. That actually, if the social economy or any potential supplier to the public sector is looking at procurement process, and that's the first time they engage with the public sector, then it's too late. The reality is, and in terms of sort of the subject for today, that system needs to be working well before the point of procurement. You know, that actually the really important point is to be working as the social economy sector, to work together, to work out what the shared experiences are, the shared learning, to build that knowledge about what procurement looks like and what's expected of you as sort of providers to the public sector and how you can comply with that, but also how you can challenge and encourage the public sector to think differently. So we might talk about that in procurement terms as preliminary market engagement, but what it really is conversation. You know, it's talking across the social economy and the public sector about how things might be done differently. And doing that well before the point of procurement, because once you're in procurement, you are stymied by the rules. However much there is that focus on breaking down those barriers are there. So I think my final point would just be to say, actually start those conversations as early as possible. And that's within the social economy as well as with the public sector, so that that learning is shared.
Great, thank you so much, Gayle. We'll have lots of time for questions. What I'm going to propose is that we hear from all the speakers first, and then we'll go out to questions after. So if you've got one, hold on to it, and we'll come back to it. Right, I'm going to hand over to Karolina now. Thank you, Gayle.
So I'll use my 5 minutes slightly differently. I am representing Birmingham City Council and I expect tons of questions from you later on. But I wanted to say something that you maybe don't hear from people working in the public sector a lot. And it's a bit of my personal story. I moved to this city about 2 decades ago in late 2006. And why am I still here? It's the place I've lived the longest in. I've never lived longer in one place than in Birmingham. And yet the question I hear the most when I come to a room, wherever, is, oh, where are you from? Where's your accent from? Which makes me think, and this is something you cannot forget because I'm being asked about it daily. weekly, it keeps coming up. And it makes you reevaluate who you are, where you belong to, and what you stand for every single time you hear this question. And I'm bringing this in today because I think many of you know this situation very well, because the social economy sector in the city represents the heart and the soul of the city. We are the people that feel this very much, or maybe are subjects to these questions daily as well. There is something about the social economy sector that brings its heart and the soul on a plate, and that's why it's so important, and that's why it's so different. Yet, in the context of economy and the economy of the city, we're missing words. We're missing the vocabulary to talk about the value of social economy. We talk about the burden of migration for our economy. We talk about the problem of women inactivity to our economy. We talk about disadvantaged communities. We talk about unemployment. We cannot talk about the value of the migrant economy. We don't know what the value of women economy is for our region. This is an issue. This is a systemic issue. This is an issue that we are unable to address because it is wrapped up in so many presumptions, in so many prejudices. It's really difficult. But what I see in the social economy sector, that this sector cuts through this nonsense because we know, and as Afzal said earlier, it's the value, it's what you believe in, you bring in to this work here. And I think this is very important. One other thing I wanted to say is that as a city, Birmingham has a massive issue, massive problem with self-identification. We are the poor relative, whether it's the poor relative of the rich north of Manchester, whether it's the poor relative of London, however we want to compare ourselves, we always end up comparing ourselves to others, and we always somehow come out poorer. And we are unable to say, how important our diversity is to the economy, how important is our arts and culture to the soul of the city. And yet we end up, and this is the perspective of my daily perspective, my daily work, my daily struggles in the council, is like, how do you battle the need to build new shiny buildings, build more, attract more inward investment, build more, and this will sort all our problems. And yet somehow we know, and we've known from the 80s, that trickle-down economics does not work for the city. It discriminates communities. And yet we keep repeating the same problem. New leaders come and they promise mountains to the communities to say, we'll do it differently, we'll value communities, and yet it remains on paper. And it doesn't happen in reality. In reality, we value the big, shiny economic gains and the big projects. So several years ago, I took a decision to actually go into the economic development and actually see firsthand what it's like to work for the team that builds massive shiny buildings. And this is how I ended up in East Birmingham team, working on projects like the HS2, like the new Blues Stadium, Birmingham Knowledge Quarter, we're part of it here, Tyseley Energy Park, some of you know this place very well. And but my challenge was, okay, so how do I counteract the narrative? Yes, we need to build these projects. We need to make sure that the city grows and grows in the right way. We develop the future sectors, future employment opportunities. All of this is true. But how do we at the same time stop displacing communities, stop displacing arts organizations from where they developed, start obsessing about land value uplift and therefore harming residents of areas that are being regenerated. And So we've done lots of projects and programs with Sarah and many of you here in the room, and you've probably heard about the Use It project that started it all and also proved it to me and to my colleagues in the city that things can be done differently. What I will tell you shortly is an experiment we did last year, specifically in East Birmingham. We've sort of demarcated the growth areas with the government, with the previous government. Michael Gove agreed on the red lines around the real opportunities, the growth zones for the city. And these ended up Birmingham Knowledge Quarter, Sports Quarter, Tyseley, Energy Park, and the HS2 with like coming into the town. And I thought, okay, so how about we actually treat them as markets, as new emerging markets, and look at how many organizations, local organizations, can be connected with these new markets as early on as possible. So we opened a call for proposals from the community organizations and CICs, so social economy organizations, to come forward with ideas of how they would like to connect with the new growth zones, with the new opportunities. And we ended up with 13 incredible organizations working with us. We had 3 organizations working with this area here, with Birmingham Knowledge Quarter, 3 organizations working with the Sports Quarter. They all specialized in sports and employment around that and skills. And then 3 organizations working with Tyseley. And I owe a lot to Evo, to economy, who helped us map the capacity and bring the organizations together. But the most important thing that happened in this program was the question we relentlessly asked through that program. And I said, please, to the organization that we worked with, I said, please don't treat this as another grant that we use to tick the boxes that we don't want you to bring any bums on seats anymore. This is not what it is about. This is to ask you, can you engage with the new markets? Do you think there is a chance for you as a community organization to start accessing the new economy that's emerging in this place? And if that, what would that be? What would be your trading opportunity linked to that new economic center that we're building as a council? So we're bringing some levers, we're unlocking an opportunity. How would you respond to that? So maybe this is an example also of how I approach co-design, but what came out through this program was incredible and links very much to the ecosystem conversation. I hope we'll circle back to the big question on how do you build ecosystem and what are all the important elements of it. But what came back is that we've got lots of organizations that don't think they can compete in the normal economy, don't think they stand a chance to be on the market, to access a market like this, don't think about income generation, and are very much grant dependent, which shortens their financial horizons, which makes them extremely volatile and not really able to respond to opportunities like these. So we have now one of the bigger findings from that program was that actually many of the organizations we worked with, what they needed the most to be able to grow and to remain strong in the face of these massive economic changes coming through to the door, was that they need to own an asset. Very simple. Hi, Eureka. We've never known that. Yeah, we did know that, but it's easier say than done to then support. But we collaborate with. So the second phase of that program, the previous phase has now finished. The second phase of the program is we actually working with these organizations that want to access social impact investment and purchase assets or go into the conversation about community asset transfer. I mean, I don't want to talk so much about that, but we collaborate with Safe Birmingham Assets, with Call Futures and Locality, and actually provide a robust support to these organizations to be able to access the building. So I will stop at that. This is just a snippet. This is just one thing that I wanted to put here as an example of how local authority could work and how we need to work differently and why we need to work differently. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Karolina, and hopefully we'll get a chance to go a bit deeper into that example and your thoughts. Charles, hand over to you.
Hello.
Hi.
Do you want a question for me? The same one, is it? About the ecosystem?
It's about the ecosystem,
okay.
I think you were going to talk a bit about your work at the Combined Authority.
Yeah, I'm just going to pick up on a couple of things that Karolina said at the moment. That is the ecosystem, that drawing that we've been working on for the last couple of years. Oh, it's up there. And that's going through a refresh at the moment, because that's one thing that I've learned. There's two bits that are missing from that. Oh, that is it. That's the new one. Excellent, thank you. Infrastructure and assets are the two additions to that, because I think asset ownership is really important, and that's going to drive a lot of change. And an acknowledgement of the fact that the West Midlands Combined Authority or Birmingham City Council or Coventry City Council or anyone else in the public sector cannot grow the social economy. What it can do is create conditions that will enable growth, but it cannot grow the social economy. That has to come from the social economy, and that's why the infrastructure is so important. So organisations like BSEC, for example, and also we've got 9 cluster organisations, or Jeff Henderson used the term social improvement districts, which I like. So you've got people like Josie and Drew as well, and a few others around the room, who are running these social improvement districts or these clusters. And I think the work that they're doing in bringing people together to work in partnership is really, really important. From the Combined Authority's point of view, it's not just about, well, there's nobody else from the Combined Authority here, because I'm going to say it's not just about money. If there is anyone from the Combined Authority here, it is very much about money. Okay? But there are things that we can do that are just about systemic changes. So the conversation Gayle was talking about procurement there. We're about to issue an updated social impact and social value statement from the Combined Authority, which looks at how we break down some of those barriers, how we use the Social Value Act in a much more purposeful and meaningful way by looking at intrinsic social value as well as added social value. So to give social entrepreneurs an opportunity to be able to say, but this is what we do anyway, rather than have to look for additionality in there. And we use the same yardstick to measure both of them as well. So there are changes coming through in the whole way of procurement at the moment. I can't announce them yet because they've still got to have board sign off, but there is a lot of changes. And anyway, we'll be talking about it in the last session today as well. So stick around if you want a bit more detail on that. But I think it's about, for me, it's also about changing the way that the public sector and my colleagues, particularly in the West Midlands Combined Authority, viewed the social economy historically, which was around, it's one of those sort of nice things to have, but it's, to be honest, you're like herding cats, honestly. The social economy is a massive thing. So what I've been doing is I've been talking about the social economy totally. I bore myself sometimes, so the amount of times I talk about it, but I do have some data now to back it up, thanks to some work that CLES have done to understand the social economy. So I know there are 9,314 organisations currently working in the social economy. They employ 102,800 people, that's paid employees, and they've got support from over 200,000 volunteers, and their contribution is about £14 million a year to the economy. So I keep talking about the scale and size of that workforce to change the narrative from being it's a nice to have to be it's an essential thing to have, and that it is a huge resource that the public sector should be using in order to achieve its goal, which is growth for everyone. And I have redone the Mayor's graphics of for everyone is now in bold capital letters, just to remind them that the only growth that we've seen over the last, I'm going to say 20 years to avoid being political, but the only growth we've seen is the growth in the number of millionaires and billionaires and the amount of money that they hold, and the growth in food banks and the growth in poverty. Now, if that's the growth we want, we can carry on and do what we've always done, but that's not the growth that's wanted. That is about seeing it as a resource. And I've now got Ed Cox as the CEO of the Combined Authority actually saying and describing the social economy as a resource, as a dynamic part of the everyday economy. And the Mayor says that as well. So there's a lot of stuff going on, which is not just about investing money in places, but the money is important when I'm in the finance meeting, but it's also about systemic change. It's about changing mindsets not just winning hearts, but winning minds as well. And I'm really pleased to say that there are a bunch of people in the public sector. She's one of them, as you've probably gathered. And but there are other people from Ed Cox and Richard Parker down who do actually now understand the value and purpose of the social economy and what it actually could achieve in this resource. So that's where I'm coming from, is to try and change that narrative. The other thing I've had to stop doing, or been able to stop doing over the last 3 years, is when I first came into the Combined Authority, I was being asked questions like, why should we invest this money in the social economy? Justify that money, justify this, justify that. Give me a breakdown of how that money's going to be spent. I've now changed that, and I actually, when I'm asked that question, why should we invest in the social economy, I turn around and say, why not? Why shouldn't we invest in it? Turn the question around and get them to answer why they're stopping it, why they think that we shouldn't be doing it. Because because then you're left with this, don't know. So we have to change that narrative. We have to take control. And the stuff that we're doing with places about bringing people together, and the stuff that AFSEL's doing with his Beacon network, those things are really important, because we have to join up and we have to have a common voice. We have to be working in partnership, and we have to harness the power of those 9,314 organisations in a way that we can make a difference and we can become much more assertive. And I think assertiveness is what's needed.
Great. Thank you so much, Charles. Great. Well, we've heard from 3 brilliant speakers. We've covered quite a lot of ground. This is your time now. Let's open it up. I'll take 2 or 3 questions at a time and then invite the panel to respond. So who would like to come in first? Okay, I've got 1, 2, 3 here. Maybe we'll take all 3. Start with this gentleman here.
Thank you. I want to ask about assets, because I agree assets can generate revenue, but they also require financing, so they have to be maintained. And if you've gone into debt to acquire the asset, that needs to be serviced. So suddenly you need to generate a lot more revenue just to cover overheads. And for smaller businesses, that's terrifying. So how do we tackle that?
Great. Thank you. Can you pass it back to Conrad behind you, please? Thanks.
Thank you. My question comes from completely the other end of the spectrum, because I'm a believer in this idea of the social economy ecosystem. But Gayle, you've spoken almost about individual relationships between public sector and businesses. Karolina, you've talked about East Birmingham and growth zones, and Charles, you've talked about the region. What scale should we be thinking? And also we had Afsal talking about place. At what scale should we be thinking about and talking about in terms of establishing this ecosystem?
Thank you. Here at the front. Yeah, thank you.
Hello, thank you. First of all, Karolina, will you like to work in Wolverhampton, please? I think far too often, as cluster leads, we've said that we talk to our council, we tell our councils what they want to do, we invite them to events like this, and they don't come. So we're busy at work, as if this isn't work. What you said and what Charles has said and what you've all said, wouldn't it be great if we could invite council leaders to replicate to an event where it's just to the council leaders, so you can all say what you've just said? Because I think we battle on lots of times, but then we see organisations that duplicate and displace what we do in our sector, and we're all struggling against that. But they think it's a great idea, build new shiny buildings, but then the council can develop so many services that already exist. And I did challenge, we had Wolverhampton Procurement at our event yesterday, and afterwards I said, some of the services you've developed, have you ever seen the impact on voluntary sector and the amount of jobs lost? And they all looked at each other and waited for someone else to answer. And I don't think that's ever been done, but I think we're all in very difficult times and we're competing with the people that should be supporting us. So can we have one of these just for council leads?
Great, thank you. I don't think there was a question in there, but I saw lots of nodding. Do you want to introduce yourself as well?
Oh, I'm Josie from Access to Business, Social Economy Cluster Lead for Wolverhampton.
Great, thank you. Right, should we take these first two questions then? So we've got one about assets and about how it can actually be quite scary if you're a smaller organisation and that prospect of taking on assets. And then we've got one about the social economy and the ecosystem. What scale should we be talking about? So should we start with the first one around assets? Does anyone want to come in on that?
I think I can. Yeah, I think I can answer that because it very much keeps cropping up. It is a daily conversation, and yes, absolutely. And the first thing we ask every single organization that comes to us: do you really need to be an asset manager? Do you really think that this is going to be that groundbreaking change for growth? And show me your accounts first, and let's look where your income streams are and how you're going to sustain that asset. And this is a massive piece of work, but if we said no, if we did not open that conversation at all, it would be just assuming that social economy organizations are and community organizations are too weak to do this, and actually it's not. And if you look where the powers sits in this country, it's those that own land and assets that are powerful. So it's only fair that we open this up. It's difficult, but hey, we're not here for an easy ride.
I can answer a bit of that as well from personal experience. Many, many years ago, when I was with the School for Social Entrepreneurs, I was approached by Birmingham City Council, and I was asked if I would be willing to accept what was the drum theatre as a community asset transfer. And I went, oh yeah, great, that big building, yeah, we could do a lot with that. And they said, yeah, well, it's £1 million. And I said, you what? They said, it's £1 million. I said, no, it's a community asset transfer. You just give it to me. And you maintain the building for a couple of years until we can get up and running and we can generate income and do it for ourselves. It's not, that's a sale. So there's a big difference in understanding between what we think is a community asset transfer and the public sector sometimes thinks as a community asset transfer. So I taking Josie's point, I would love to get every single elected councillor in a room, might even talk to them, and to tell them, and I can explain. I think it's not so much. I know of my local councillor in Alton where I live is actually really, really good. He gets it. He's on the ball. He's there all the time. But not all of them are. But to be able to get them to understand the power of community, I think, is one thing. But it's also officers within who actually do the work and make some of the decisions. They need a better understanding of what the social economy is all about and how it works. And I think the only way we can do that is by demonstration of facts and data. So, the revelation that there were 9,314 organisations in the West Midlands in the social economy came as a shock and a surprise to everybody, including me. But it's a powerful statistic, and it's 103,000 employees, and it's 300,000 people who have dedicated their life to addressing inequalities. And once you start getting that message across and you tell stories about what they can actually do, and Richard Parker said it himself, tell me stories, give me examples that I can use to illustrate just how powerful the work you do is. So you're changing lives, so tell me what lives you've changed, how you changed them, how you've gone about them. Tell us the stories, because that's how politics works, through storytelling. But yeah, so I wish I knew what the answer was to assets. I think the reality is that there are too many small social enterprises. 70% of those 9,314 are small and micro businesses. There's no way that they can acquire an asset. But collectively, maybe you can. So maybe BCAN can acquire something because you've got a lot of organisations working together. So consortia and partnership working to own those assets is probably the way to do it. The reality is you're going to take on a debt. We need to work with the public sector to understand that community asset transfer is not a sale. It's a transfer of assets to a community to make it work and change the mindset there and change the understanding. Birmingham is a fire sale at the moment. To do that, and then look at ways that we can generate investment and funding to be able to support you in doing that. There was a government scheme recently, the Community Ownership Fund, which is about £300 million. It wasn't perfect, and it's a drop in the ocean as to what's actually needed, but we need to be looking at those as funding streams to do it.
I think I'll just come at this from a slightly different angle, though. Just thinking about it from a public contracts rather than a community asset transfer point of view. I've seen any number of public contracts over the year fall apart because the risks aren't placed with the right person. And particularly when it comes to property, whether that is leisure facilities, community facilities, libraries, that if all of that burden is transferred over to the entity providing the services through those facilities, then actually it becomes unsustainable. And I think those are some of the sort of most daunting situations that I've seen where that asset issue is presented. I always come into contract drafting going, actually, you know what, we need to write the contract so that the risk is with the person who's most capable of dealing with that risk. So I think sometimes there will be situations where actually community asset transfer isn't the answer. It's leases, it's licenses, it's not necessarily shorter term relationships, but different relationships around those assets, so that actually you're putting the responsibility with the person who can cope with it. And I appreciate that is hard when you look at the public sector context when they've got no money either, that actually maintaining those buildings, those facilities is really, really hard on the public sector too. But I would always start with the principle of who is best placed to take on this risk.
Incredibly important. Thank you.
There was the question that Conrad asked about what scale do we work at in terms of social economy. I think it's at all levels, actually. I think you can start locally, and I think the work that the clusters have done is really a good example of where they brought people together to work on a common goal. So you need that local level, but it also needs to be joined up at a regional level as well, or as a larger area. So the fact that the clusters are all working together and talking to each other and they're working in partnership, and Ofstal's got the Beacon network on top of that, you can start to then scale it up. So I think you start wherever you can get the traction is the answer to that, and start at the local level and get community organisations in a particular locality looking at issues from that area, come up with a plan, and then let's implement the plan, but then also talk to each other and have that network of organisations that can actually share good practice and share ideas and share skills and expertise as well.
I completely agree with that. Sorry, I'm cutting across you. I have to admit, I think that you're absolutely right, Charles, that it has to happen at every level. It can be grassroots right up to leadership. It absolutely can. I have 2 points I want to make. One, and I know this sounds ridiculous, but I am absolutely sick to death of pilots. We've piloted everything. And the reality is that what we're not doing is taking those pilots and learning from them. So actually, that conversation, that shared learning is where we should be starting. Not going, can we try this at a small scale? Can we learn from doing it on a small scale? But actually, who's done it at a small scale? Who has piloted this thing? And who can we learn from? Let's not reinvent the wheel. Let's not make the same mistakes that other people have. Let's actually learn from each other. And the other thing I'd say is in terms of that shared learning, Sarah mentioned a book I wrote far too long ago, is actually taking resources like that. It doesn't have to be written by me. There's so many resources out there, but actually updating them, making sure they're current and making sure that we share them with each other to go, again, all of the guidance, all of the knowledge is there and it's all written down. And why aren't we just giving those things to people?
Great. Thanks, Gail.
Pilots, in my opinion, are used as an excuse for short-term funding. Like, we've got money for 12 months, so let's call it a pilot and pretend we're going to do something long-term.
That sounds familiar. Yeah. Great. We've got some more time. Let's open it back up again. Any thoughts, reflections, questions that people would like to share? We've got one here, one there. Should we take those two? Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Jones-Rigby. I'm CEO for Bethel Health and Healing Network. It's been really interesting hearing the conversations today, because I was speaking with Sarah very early on this morning. So we run a charity, but we're just about to launch the social enterprise arm for our private doula service. We work in maternal health. We run a listening programme. And the other thing that's really interesting is the other thing we're looking at is acquiring a space, a building, an asset. And we had conversations about that. But like you, we were just concerned about the surety of the contracts that we had, say, for example, with our NHS partners, where we deliver, that they would be continuous, and in order to service the debt, if we had one, if we were able to do that. So we are speaking with social investors and things like that. But I think the bigger point for me is we know as a sector that we do things really, really well. We do them at an amazing cost. We looked at our services, and when we were producing our impact reports, it shows that we are a third or a fifth far cheaper than the equivalent public sector services. We know there's good efficacy. We know that there's innovation, all of these things that are expected for businesses, but yet still there seems to be barriers. And I'm wondering what we can do collectively to say, look, we've been doing it, lots of people, I think, I've got grey hairs, we've been doing it for decades. And we know that the experience is within the sector. We have the data to show the impact of what we do. Sometimes it feels like, what else can we do? I am encouraged, however, that there are some commissioners and some funders moving more to that kind of collaborative co-production model. But I'm wondering collectively, what is it that we can do to say, look, we can do all of these things, but you're going to need to help us just a little bit more, particularly maybe at the beginning, once an asset's been transferred. How do you support us in saying, well, actually, you don't pay anything for the first 12 months. We'll stand that so you can get yourselves up and running and so on. So it's kind of a general question as a sector. What do we do in order to change that narrative? Because it's a paradigm shift that we're expecting from those who are making the decisions.
Thank you. Is it Jennifer?
Yes.
Yeah, great, thanks, Jennifer. We've got one more question over here. Thanks.
Hello, Mariana from Ruda Organization, Romanian Supporting Community in West Midlands. Thank you for all the insights, really powerful and wonderful to hear from all the speakers. My question was around, if we build this partnership, who would be best, when we build, not if, when we build this partnership between public sector, community organizations, even politicians, just you don't know, never know, who would be best in your experience from a risk point of view to manage this? Because I've been myself part of different groups who started to do it, who piloted, as you mentioned, and then they just fall down because we are so stretched ourselves into different type of networks and groups, and we don't do a 9-to-5 job. Our job continues often after 5 o'clock during the night time when you get to work. And from all the lessons learned that we are learning, it's such a multicultural environment, vulnerable communities to serve, where you're being pulled from pillar to post to support those, and in the same time trying to find funding for your organizations. Who would be, in your experience or from your point of view, somebody who can manage us once we enter in this partnership? Because without somebody on the top managing us and pulling us to accountability of what we do, we're not going to succeed. And this is where, that's my question. Thank you.
Right, thank you, Mariana. I think Karolina would like to go in. Yep.
Okay. Thank you, sir. I'll try this one. I jumped before Charles, although this is more of a Charles area. So do you want to go first?
Who should lead it? The person with the most passion, and a little bit of frustration and anger goes a long, long way as well. For me, that's always been my experience. I used to work for the School for Social Entrepreneurs, and I heard a story about the guy that started the School for Social Entrepreneurs. It was a very, very strong ethics and morals and values around it. His way of choosing his successor was to suggest something for the organisation that was totally off-beat, totally away from any other values that did. The person who got the job as to take over that organisation was the one that kicked up the most fuss and said, that's wrong, that's not what we're here to do, that's not what we're there to do, and showed the most passion for it. It wasn't necessarily the most senior person in the organisation. So Alistair Wilson, who's the current CEO of the School for Social Entrepreneurs, got the job because he threw his toys out of the cot when a suggestion was made that things were going to change, and he had a complete hissy fit, and he was appointed the job, and he was the junior member of staff at the time. So it's the person with the most passion that you need to have in there, and the one that's really, really going to do it. They don't have to be the most senior, they don't have to be the most experienced, they don't have to be the most qualified, they just have to have the drive, and if you got that drive, then things will continue.
So I will maybe slightly challenge the question because I don't necessarily see this as a need for management. In ecosystem, you've got many players with different functions and different roles to play. And I will be happy to share with you like an early map we have done with Sarah to try and understand whom we have in the city. We've done this for Birmingham. Sorry, Charles, I can share it with you as well, but this was done for Birmingham specifically. We looked at who we have in the system itself, who are the social economy entities that we work with, and what stages and what kind of support they may need at different stages. There will be different type of support needed at the pre-startup, startup, and going all the way to like income generation, sort of that way, and the growth areas, the clusters, the consortia, all that accessing social finance. On the other side is those organizations who are registered as CACs but are fully grant dependent, so different support needed. But then that's the sector. But then around the sector, you've got the organizations that are providing support, that are the bridge organizations that would be helping you with funding, helping you with capacity, with education, and most of them are also grant funded. So that changes. So understanding the nature of that is really important, but it's not necessarily for these organizations to lead. They would be there to support. So there is a strong case for self-leadership, definitely for partnership, for really being quick and brave. And yes, absolutely, just like you say, to thrive in ambiguity, because there's a hell lot of ambiguity, like Afsal said early first thing today. But then, in addition, that's not the end of the picture. Then on the outside of this are the funders and where the funding comes from. And there you've got very different ways of looking at the sector as well. You've got the government with the central government, now with the new office for the impact investment and all the funding that are coming through Pride and Place, and and different streams of funding that will become very prominent and visible very soon. The single settlement, and then you've got the combined authority and local authorities. This is all very important, but that's not the end of it. You also have the other anchor institutions like the NHS, universities that also have the social value. You've got the higher education with all the programs. You've got the corporate partners like big partners like PwC, KPMG, that all have elements of programs for the social economy. Then you have the social impact investors that are coming with capital funding, with big finance that could be available, but then you need capacity for that. And when you look at this like that as an ecosystem, it's a very complex machinery that works and is interdependent. So I wouldn't be able to tell you, what the best way to manage that is. I don't think it's possible, but there is definitely a way to be clear about it and almost like draw pathways of how to find your way through it and how to build alliances.
Thank you, Karolina. I'm afraid it feels like we're just getting into it, which is always the way. I'm really sorry. We're running out of time now, and I appreciate, Jennifer, we didn't get onto your question about how we might work more collectively. Let's keep the conversation going in the break, if that's okay, and about how we could get more concessionary terms for asset transfer. So let's have a chat about that. Just if you could join me in thanking our panel.